next on NFL Live.
It's always Barry Sanders is the best running back, and Thurman Thomas is the best all-around back, and I don't know the difference between those two.
Who is the best running back in pro football, Thurman Thomas or Barry Sanders? Another great one, O.J. Simpson, to give us his opinion.
Who's the best team in pro football, the Washington Redskins, or let's talk more about it.
There's no revenge factor as far as I'm concerned. The only thing I'm concerned about is us winning the game Sunday.
Art Shell says revenge is not a factor in the rematch between the Bills and the Raiders. We'll talk about it next on NFL Live. The Astrodome in Houston, where the division-leading Oilers are still in search of their first ever AFC Central title. 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh, they had a chance to wrap it up, but didn't get it done. Today, they try again against an old nemesis. Hello, everyone. Bob Costas along with Will McDonough and Bill Parcells. OJ joins us shortly from Los Angeles, site of today's showdown between the Bills and the Raiders. Now, 3 weeks remain in the regular season, with division titles so far claimed by Washington and Buffalo. A team that thought it would already be in that category is the Houston Oilers, who meet the Steelers today in the Astrodome. For a report, out to Houston, Charlie Jones and Todd Christensen. Charlie?
And, Bob, as you know, whenever the Steelers and the Oilers get together, it's a renewal of an old, tough rivalry.
Well, you know, in the late 70s, Charlie, arguably the two best teams in professional football were the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Houston Oilers. And every time the Houston Oilers seemed to come up short. And so Bum Phillips had this quote. He said, last year we knocked on the door. This year we beat on the door. Next year we're going to kick it in. But unfortunately for the Houston Oilers, they're never quite able to get over the hump. Now,
wait a minute. What about that next year they were going to kick it in? Don't let that go by.
Well, what ended up happening here is that 10 years later, here they are in the Astrodome with a chance for a Super Bowl to get there, but instead Pittsburgh screwed it up for them by defeating them with a 50-yard field goal there by Gary Anderson. So all the time during this tenure, they've been bridesmaids, but never brides.
Yes, but what Todd didn't say is when they were going to kick it in is that the Raiders ended up kicking it in that year.
Thank goodness.
Last Monday night here at the Astrodome, the House of Pain, it was a House of Pain for wide receiver Ernest Gibbons.
Well, the one delivering the pain here is Wes Hopkins, and he paid $7,500 for this elbow to Ernest Gibbons' nose that ended up breaking. And as a result of that, you can see there, he is going to be wearing the very stylish shades to protect not only his nose, but his eyes from the glare.
And the stylish shades, this is what they look like. You like that? You look pretty good.
And so do you.
Thank you. Okay, Bob.
All right, gentlemen, we'll check back with you later. Continuing to zip around the league. Next up, the Broncos versus the Browns in Cleveland. The Browns are 6-7 with an outside chance at a wild card if they win their final 3. Denver is tied with the Raiders atop the AFC West, but they know that the Raiders have a tough one at home later today against the Bills. For more on Denver and Cleveland, Joel Myers, Dan Hampton in Cleveland. Joel?
Bob, almost hard to believe we are in Cleveland because it's so warm. Game time temperature right now at 57 degrees. And in fact, when I came to the stadium this morning, I found my partner Dan Hampton. He's not used to this warm weather, playing all those years in Chicago. He was in the lake taking a dip, so he is ready to go. The big story coming in, though, quarterback John Elway, the tendonitis in his throwing shoulder, told us, Dan, the warm-up period, still a very difficult process.
Well, it is. The first 20 minutes for John Elway warming up is 20 minutes from hell. But he says, once I get through that 20 minutes, I can throw the ball pretty well. I can do anything I need to, except when I have to get outside of the pocket. Now, when I throw off the run, I'm having a little bit more difficulty. But today, he will be calling his own plays, and he won't call any plays that he doesn't have confidence in.
And if there's to be a psychological advantage possibly for one of the two teams, it could go to the Cleveland Browns, whose last night at their team meeting, they were addressed by all-time rushing great Jim Brown. So a classic confrontation once again, Cleveland and Denver. Not this time for the AFC Championship, but a very big game for both. Bob?
All right, Joel, Dan, thank you. Remember, even though Denver is tied for first place with the Raiders beat them twice head-to-head. L.A. has the tiebreaker. Now, Kansas City is a game back in the AFC West. A win today would leave them in very good shape, at least for a wild card. They host the Chargers this afternoon at Arrowhead, and for more on that, we bring in Tom Hammond and Joe Namath.
Bob, like Cleveland, it's an absolutely balmy day in Kansas City, expecting temperatures in the 60s here today. But things not quite so sunny for the Chiefs, who need the win, as you pointed out. Their leading ground gainer, Christian Okoye, out with an injury, gaining 999 yards on the season. And, Joe, I guess the absence of big Christian Okoye means more pressure on Steve DeBerg, who's been battling a slump.
Well, sure, DeBerg, the 15-year veteran, had a slump. He played well last week up at Seattle. I find it interesting, though, that DeBerg, a 15-year veteran, veteran's going back to basics, getting his footwork down pat. I expect him to play well as Barry Word can run that football.
Yeah, Barry Word will start for Okoye today, and a significant defensive injury for the Chiefs. All-Pro quarterback Albert Lewis also out. Bob?
Okay, now the best matchup of the day is in Los Angeles, where the Bills and Raiders meet in a late game on NBC. In their last meeting, Buffalo won the AFC Championship by stomping the Raiders this past January 51-3. A win today by the Silver and Black would clinch a Raider playoff spot. For more, we go to the Bills Hotel in Los Angeles, where O.J. Simpson is standing by. Juice.
Well, Bob, I had a chance to spend some time with most of the Bills players just a few minutes ago, and they say that this Raider team is a much improved team than the one they played in the championship last year, and they just don't want to show up like they did against Kansas City earlier this year when they came in flat, and they say that Kansas City jumped on them quite a bit. One note of concern for the Bills is Bruce Smith. Now, last week he got poked in his left eye, and he had a bad eye, so all week he played with a patch on his eye, and today is the first day he's going to go with that patch off his eye. He also mentioned that the long plane ride here yesterday, his knee stiffened up, so it wasn't feeling that well. He said he'll go as long as he can, and depending on how the game is going, that will determine how he's going to play. The big question is how the Raiders are going to defend the Bills. As you know, last year they went with their basic 4-3 defense. It didn't work. The Bills scored 50-something points against them. The key to the Raiders defending the Bills is going to be their linebackers. You got to take a look at Ellison, Moss, and Winston and how they're going to handle Thurman Thomas. Now, it's been raining all day here in Buffalo. I'm here in L.A., all night rather, in L.A. The field is wet. It's a natural field. That normally will not affect speed, but it will affect quickness. And Thurman Thomas relies on quickness. So early in the game, I think you should pay a lot of attention to the linebackers of the Raiders, how they handle Thurman Thomas. If they can't handle him, they can't win.
Okay, O.J., now, of course, if Bruce Smith played for the Buccaneers, he would probably leave that patch on his eye. On another subject, recently released hostage Terry Anderson remains at the American military base in Wiesbaden, Germany today, and will likely depart for America in the next few days. Football certainly isn't at the top of Terry Anderson's thoughts today, but his hometown team is a small part of what he's now coming home to. This was the scene in Wiesbaden on Friday as Anderson became a free man for the first time in 6.5 years. Clad in a Buffalo Bills sweatshirt, he took time to reflect on home in Western New York.
Can you look out at those cameras and say something to the people of Western New York?
Yes, I would be there now if it weren't wintertime and so darn cold, I think. I love Western New York, and I intend to go back. But I'm not quite ready to face the winter yet.
Home for Anderson is Batavia, New York, a small town outside Buffalo. Right now, Anderson might be the most surprised Bills fan of all. You see, when he was taken hostage in March of '85, the Bills were in between seasons that each produced miserable 2-14 records. Terry would hardly recognize today's dominating Bills, but the Bills have recognized Anderson by extending him an open invitation to Rich Stadium and a trade-in on that sweatshirt for an official team jersey.
It's nice enough to wear one of those. I think we deserve not only a game jersey, maybe a couple tickets to a playoff game. How does that sound?
Now, the people at Armed Forces Television have arranged for the Bills game with the Raiders to be available should Terry Anderson want to watch it today in Wiesbaden. Up next, O.J. rejoins us to address the question a lot of people around the NFL are asking. Just who is the best running back in football, Sanders or Thomas?
NFL Live is brought to you by Subaru. It's what to drive. By Canoe, the men's cologne by Dana. And by Radio Shack, America's technology store. Nobody compares.
Thomas breaking tackles. He has a touchdown.
Taylor draw to Berry, cuts it back to the right. He's to the 15. Berry to the 10, breaks it, tackle 5, and he will take it in. Touchdown, Lions.
There's something, both of them. Of course, there are other good running backs in the NFL, particularly Emmitt Smith, who's emerging in Dallas. But by consensus, Sanders and Thomas are the top two. The question now for O.J., who joins us from the Bills Hotel in Los Angeles, who juice is the best?
Good question, Bob. And when you talk about players of this caliber, it obviously brings up a lot of debate. You know what I said to myself this week? Instead of debating it, let me get on the plane, let me go and talk to the individuals involved.
It is almost a feeling that you can do anything and that there's no way they can stop you. I'm not the fastest guy in the world. You know, I'm not the strongest guy in the world, but I get the job done.
Where do you rate yourself among the top backs in the league?
Well, I think definitely I'm in the top 2. I don't think people really want to label me as the best running back in the National Football League because I do so much and Barry does so little for Detroit. The only thing that he really does is just run the football, and where I catch, you know, I block, I run, I do, you know, I do everything that I can to help Buffalo Bills win.
My team asked me basically to run the ball, you know, and catch passes every now and then. But they know I'm a runner. That's what I do best.
When it comes to pure running ability, the electrifying moves, few would argue that Sanders is the best. But check out the numbers. Thomas leads the league in rushing. Sanders is second. Add the receiving yards, and you can see why Thomas is called the best overall back in football.
What about this thing about being an all-around back? It's, you know, it's flattering, but it's got to have a little negative connotations at times.
I think so. You know, every time you pick up a magazine or a newspaper, it's always Barry Sanders is the best running back and Thurman Thomas is the best all-around back, and I don't know the difference between those two.
If you played in Buffalo in that offensive scheme, do you think that you could be as effective as Thurman?
Well, I don't know if I could be as effective, but I could be effective doing it. I mean, Thurman, he's a very good pass receiver, and he's had a lot of practice doing it, and I haven't, you know, so I don't know if I'll be as effective, but I think I can get the job done.
Thomas and Sanders are used to the comparisons. They've known each other a long time. Imagine this. They played for the same college team. When Sanders was a sophomore at Oklahoma State University, Thomas was a senior All-American.
There was never really any race or any competition as far as who was going to have the job. I mean, Thurman was a man, you know, but a couple of times he had gotten hurt, and I went in and did a good job.
Good enough to win the Heisman Trophy as a junior.
Right, last game of the season, you had a chance to win the rushing title against Washington, but you left the game early, and Barry won the rushing title, beat you by 7 yards. This year, the last game is against the Lions. You got a chance to win the rushing title. Are you coming out of the game?
I've already talked to my offensive lineman about that. You know, there's no way in the world they're going to let me come out of the game this year. And if it comes down to me and Barry come to the final game of the rushing title, you know, my offensive lineman told me they're going to keep me there the whole 4 quarters.
Now, understand this. When you talk about Barry Sanders, as far as pure running the football, I think you got to put him with Gil Sayers, Jim Brown. I like to think yours truly as one of the best of all time. But let me put it this way. If I was drafting a team and I had a team that had some weapons, say like the Jets with good wide receivers, undoubtedly I would take Thurman Thomas because his ability to do so many things will enhance everybody else and he would improve your offense. But if I was starting from scratch and I had nothing, I'd go with Barry Sanders because he doesn't need a lot of great football players around him. As long as they're hustling on offense, he's going to give you an offense, therefore giving you the time to draft and build up your defense and the other elements of your team. Bill, you're a coach. Which one would you take?
Well, I think you've got to evaluate them perfectly, OJ. I think they're both great backs, but the big thing here, we're talking about greatness over a period of time. I think longevity and durability are what are going to determine that. And in that case, I think I'd have to take Barry Sanders. I think he's built to last, just like one of those Delco batteries.
Yeah, but you got to admit, Barry being a runner, and you like that conservative, normally dump truck kind of runner, but you like that conservative offense. I would say the other Bill that we have, Bill Walsh, would probably look towards Thurman Thomas because of the type of offense he runs.
Well, I think you got to keep your backs on the field. Now, I want those backs that can stay on the field. Don't come off every 2 plays like you used to, OJ.
Look out.
You have twisted the man around and left him momentarily flabbergasted. So, on that point, yeah, you hurt his knee. You realize the man has sustained a knee injury in the lobby of a hotel. What a pathetic state of affairs. The late game of our doubleheader gives you a chance to see either Thurman Thomas, whose Bills visit the Raiders, or Barry Sanders, whose Lions host the Jets. And we're back with Will McDonough, who is, so far as I know, in perfect health, right after this. Well, we continue on with our merry crew. It seems to be the consensus that the Redskins are the best team in the NFL, with maybe the Buffalo Bills just behind, but at least a few people would reverse that order, huh?
Yeah, Bob, I think you'd have to say Washington probably still is the best. But with Bruce Smith back and the way he played last Sunday against the Jets, some of the coaches I talked to this week and people around the league say, watch Buffalo. They could be the team in the rise because their defense is now starting to play very well. I think the first 6 or 7 games of the year, they averaged about 24 points they were giving up. Now it's down to 17. It could go lower with this guy.
What do you think?
I think Buffalo's defense is playing much better right now, but I still think there's some inherent weaknesses in that defense, and they could show up against the right team. I think the safety position, things like that, could show up.
Yeah, I talked to their general manager, Bill Paulian, this week. He says this is the best defense they're playing in the last 3 years. He said their 3 linebackers have been great. Bruce Smith is great, and Al Davis is the one who told me, he said, Will, right now, I think these guys are as good as anybody in football, and of course the Raiders are playing them today.
The weakness is against the run, right? The way you guys were able to beat them in the Super Bowl, even though the game was very close, and the way Kansas City clobbered them in that Monday night game.
Well, if they do have a weakness, it's because they're not a big physical defense. I think if you try to run laterally against them, they have enough speed with Bennett and Talley and Conlon and guys like that to chase you down. But if you go right at them, I think they still have to be tested to prove that they're real solid against that phase.
Now, the Eagles are real solid against almost everything. I mean, what do you do against that defense?
Well, Bob, I think a lot of people feel right now that they're one of the best defenses that ever played this game. During the week, I called Buddy Ryan, who coached the Purple People Eaters in Minnesota back in the late 60s and in the 70s. And he had Chicago in 84 and 85 when they were great. And he started these guys, and he said, well, these guys right now are as good as Chicago was in 84 and 85. And I think Chicago was the best. So he says, right now, he even rates them higher than the Steel Curtain. That's how great he thinks, particularly the front 4. And I know you like their front 4.
Well, I like their front 7. I think they've got 7 guys up there. It's very difficult to block any one of those 7. But on the backside, I think there may be just a little weakness there in the Eagles secondary also.
Well, let me ask you how you feel about this. I talked to Fritz Shermer this week, the defensive coordinator of the Cardinals, and he said he thinks this Eagles team, 11 men, is the best tackling defense he's ever seen.
Excellent tacklers with a lot of speed. They get a lot of people to the ball. The coverage aspect is where they might have a little weakness.
Okay.
But how about the comparison to the Bears? You told me earlier this year, and you've always said it, that Bears team that crushed you guys in the playoffs in '85 on their way to the Super Bowl was the best you faced.
They were the best that I faced. The Eagles are very close to that, and their front 4, I think, may be superior to them.
Okay, well, here's the way Buddy compared them when I asked him. Now, he coached both of them, right? He said the Eagles have the better front 4. Chicago had the better linebackers, but he feels the Eagles have the edge with the defensive back. So 2 out of the 3 groups on defense, he gives it to this Eagles team.
Okay, let's move on to another topic. Last week, the Falcons were about to have their playoff hopes take a dip. They were trailing at home to Green Bay. Chris Miller had sat out the first half with a very high fever. They got him on the training table. He comes in, and he's part of their rally in the second half, and they pull the game out in the last second.
That's right, Bob, and it's interesting. I was talking to Jerry Glanville Friday, and he said, Will, they took him in on the table, they gave him a couple of bags of IVs, and they gave him some other shots, he said, and he came out and he played a great game. He got us off the hook. But I didn't give him the game ball. You know who I gave the game ball to? And I says, who? He says, I gave it for the team doctor, Charles Harris, for getting him out there to play.
A typical Glanville move. Up next, the hottest man in the NFL. That would be the streaking Will McDonough, winner of 4 straight, as we bring you the upset special selections. An update on a couple of key players in the Eagles-Giants game today at the Meadowlands. Jim McMahon, despite the bad right elbow that caused him to miss the second half of last Monday night's game, will start for Philadelphia today. Lawrence Taylor, who missed last Sunday's game with a sprained ligament in his left knee, will bounce back more quickly than most would have, and he'll start today for the Giants. Now, on to the scoreboard for the upset specials to this late point in the season, and I maintain a slim lead. Will, with 4 consecutive correct upset selections, moves into a second-place tie with O.J. and Bill still within striking distance. Out to Los Angeles, where O.J. is at the Bills Hotel. Very quickly, your choice.
Well, I'm still impressed with that Philly defense, so I'm going with Philly over the Giants.
All right.
Jets over Detroit.
Jets over Detroit. Lions haven't lost a home game all year.
Tampa Bay to win at home tonight against Minnesota.
Now, I was going to take the Eagles over the Giants. You know, the way the Eagles are playing, for them to be a 3-point underdog, that looks like a good selection. But it's gutless to duplicate O.J.'s choice. So he's left me with no choice but to take the Phoenix Cardinals, a 2-touchdown underdog at home against the Redskins. Why do I do the things I do?
This is the Domino's Pizza NFL Live Halftime Report. Brought to you by Domino's Pizza. Nobody knows like Domino's how you like pizza at home.
Okay, with Will McDonough and Bill Parcells, Bob Costas in New York. Welcome to those of you watching Cleveland and Denver, and those of you who just saw Gary Anderson, who sometimes is about all the offense the Steelers can claim, drill a 54-yarder to make that score, 10-3 at halftime. The Oilers leading the Steelers. Now, the Oilers, of course, with the victory, would finally wrap up their first ever outright AFC Central Championship. Jack Pardee's team has been struggling, and they go on the road to Cleveland and then to the Giants to conclude the season, so they want to get it done at home today. Alan Pinkett's fumble at the Pittsburgh 7 thwarted an early drive for Houston, but here he scores from the 7 and gives them a 7-0 lead. There have been a couple of costly turnovers for Pittsburgh, and then in general their offense is run like this, as rookie Leroy Thompson stumbles down, gets back up, and it was hardly worth the effort as he stopped for a 7-yard loss. Houston by 7, 10-3. Willie?
Well, if I were a Houston Oilers fan, I'd be concerned once again about the turnovers. They're the worst in the AFC, giving up 37 turnovers on offense already this year, and concerned about the way their offense is playing in general. They only scored 14 points 3 weeks ago in Pittsburgh, and then they had a tough night against Philadelphia last Monday night, and they're struggling against Pittsburgh again today.
Well, the Eagles, who had been playing especially well and, of course, registered that Monday night victory over Houston, are having their troubles at the Meadowlands against the Giants. 14-3 in favor of New York. More bad news for Philadelphia. Jim McMahon, who has spent most of his career, it seems, as a tackling dummy. For all of his excellence, he has just been battered about as much as any quarterback of his generation. Today, he was hit by nose tackle Lorenzo Freeman of the Giants. He goes out with a bruised chest. The much-traveled Jeff Kemp has replaced him at quarterback, and it is doubtful that McMahon will return today. Phil Simms has thrown 2 touchdown passes, both to Dave Meggett, an 8-yarder and a 14-yarder. Now, Simms, in 7 quarters as the Giant quarterback, has thrown 6 touchdown passes. Jeff Hostetler, the man he replaced, threw 5 in 11 games before he was hurt. Bill?
The Giants look a lot more alert this week. Their defense is playing very aggressively, and until late in the half, they didn't make any mistakes offensively. They did turn the ball over a little bit late as they wound down the second quarter a couple of times. But the Giants look like they're ready to go today, and Philadelphia looks like that they don't have that edge, you know, coming off that Monday night. Sometimes it's tough to get it back by next Sunday, and it doesn't look like they're quite as sharp defensively as they were last Monday night.
Okay, straight to highlights of the game. Some of you folks are watching the Broncos and the Browns in Cleveland. Of course, they played those 3 AFC championship games, and that man, John Elway, kept the Browns out of 3 Super Bowls. Here he is in the first quarter, being intercepted by Cedric Figueroa, who returns it to the Denver 37-yard line, and that sets up the game's first score. It comes 4 plays later as Kevin Mack will run it over from 3 yards out, and it's 7-0 Cleveland. You see, barely gets across. And then into the second quarter from the spread formation, Elway, well protected, steps up into the pocket, zings this one to Michael Young, who makes the fine outstretched catch for the touchdown, and this one is tied at 7 apiece. Moving along, San Diego at Arrowhead against the Chiefs. They've gone to halftime with a 14-0 San Diego lead. Marty Schottenheimer has to get the victory here. He concludes the year at San Francisco and at the Raiders. So this would be a very costly defeat if they don't get it. That's Rod Bernstein on a 4th and 1, sustaining a long first-half drive by getting 2 yards and keeping it alive. The first quarter drive bled over into the second, and this is how it ends with Nate Lewis catching the 6-yard touchdown pass from John Freese. They kept the ball for 12 minutes and 18 plays to go 80 yards for a 7-0 lead. And then Donald Frank, a second-year free agent signee out of Winston-Salem State, steps in front of the intended receiver, picks off Steve DeBerg, returns it 71 yards for a touchdown. Late in the first half, DeBerg was again intercepted in San Diego territory. Now, in the 2 games which they lost before they righted themselves with a victory against Seattle last week, they turned the ball over 9 times. 2 costly turnovers again this week by DeBerg on the interceptions.
I don't think there's any question. Kansas City's season's on the line right here. They finish up with the Raiders in San Francisco. They don't win this one. They might have trouble even getting in the playoffs. So they've had problems every year with San Diego. Even this year when they beat them in San Diego, it was a 3-point game. They always have problems with the Chargers' running game.
Here's another team in potential trouble. New Orleans, after the great start, has lost 3 in a row, and they're trailing at Dallas 10-7. This one at halftime. If they should lose and Atlanta wins tonight, first-place tie in the NFC West when it looked like it belonged to the Saints. Chicago has a 21-10 lead at halftime at Soldier Field over the Packers. Brad Mustard, 2 touchdown runs. Jim Harbaugh, a 20-yard touchdown pass to Wendell Davis. And Indianapolis leads at New England 14-3. If the Colts win it, they might blow the #1 draft choice. We're back with a halftime preview of the late game most of you will see later on today on NBC, the Bills and the Raiders.
NFL Live Halftime Report. Brought to you by Domino's Pizza. Nobody knows like Domino's how you like pizza at home.
And welcome back to our NFL Live studios in New York. Coming up, the second game of our NBC doubleheader, and most of you will see a rematch of last year's AFC Championship game between the Bills and the Raiders. A game won by Buffalo 51-3. Bill Parcells gives us a look at some of today's keys.
The strength of the Raiders secondary is in their corners, Lionel Washington and Terry McDaniel, who do a good job of man-to-man coverage, which will cause some problems for the Bills. Look for the Bills to use McKellar and Thomas to match up against the Raiders' interior defense. Every once in a while, Buffalo will deploy Thurman Thomas, as you see located here, in a wide receiver position, which forces the Miami safety, Louis Oliver, to play a one-on-one defense with him. You see Thomas comes down, fakes the move to the inside, and then beats Oliver back out in the flat to take advantage of the one-on-one situation. Kelly picks him up nicely, and of course there's no help anywhere, and Thomas drags Oliver in for the score against the Dolphins. Number 99, Winston Moss, is one of the few Raider linebackers that can play one-on-one with a running back. In this case, Denver's Steve Sewell. Elway sprints out, Moss gets through some traffic, maintains nice coverage on the third down play. Of course, he'll be asked to cover Buffalo's Thurman Thomas today, a little more difficult task. A key loss to the Raiders' defense is Howie Long, who sprained a ligament in his left knee last Sunday night against the Chargers. Rookie Nolan Harrison, 6'5", 290 pounds, from Indiana, will be inserted into the lineup to take Long's place.
It's tough. I mean, you're talking about losing an experienced veteran player and putting him in with a young, unexperienced, un-NFL experienced rookie. But Nolan, I think what he lacks in experience makes up for in size and excitement. So, you know, he gets excited out there. And I think that's something that'll help us quite a bit.
Howie's feared. You know, a lot of offenses, you know, they structure their offense, their game plan around Howie Long. They either take it to him or they try to run away from him. What I want to do is, you know, because I know they're going to try to take it to me during the game, I want to make sure that they don't think that this is going to be a weak spot in the defense, that they're going to have trouble if they try to come my way.
The Raiders' offense has been up and down all season. 3 weeks ago against Seattle, the Raiders showed they could move the football and score points. And they're going to have to do that against Buffalo today, because you know Buffalo will score.
Okay, last time 51-3. Does that matter today?
Yeah, it matters because I think the Raiders will be able to use this as a measuring stick, but I think that game just got out of control. You throw games like that away. You know, the Raiders had played them in mid-season on a Monday night game and had Buffalo beaten until the fourth quarter up in Buffalo. So this is a little different deal, and I think the Raiders use this as a measuring stick to where they are.
Now, they got Nick Bell back. They've got Marcus Allen back after he missed most of the season. So this enables them to do some things they couldn't have done had they played Buffalo earlier.
Well, that's right, because that if Buffalo has a weakness, it's right at them. Those are big backs. They can run up inside tough, and that's what the Raiders are going to have to do, you know, if they're going to control the game. They're not going to win a shootout, but they've got to play the way they want to play and not play the way Buffalo wants them to.
There are two big matchups in this game that the Raiders have to contend with. One is what to do with Thurman Thomas. He's the guy that other defenses can't seem to match up with. And I think that's one of the reasons the Raiders, after what happened in the championship game last year, went out and got Winston Moss, just like Miami went out and got Grimsley to try to cover him out of the backfield. The other one is what do you do with Bruce Smith, which is I'd like to ask you, because most teams are going to try to double him now. He's so good. And when that happens, you give up somebody out of your offense to try to help out the offensive tackle that's in front of him.
Well, the best thing you could do there is use an extra lineman, make it a 3-on-2 situation over there, and hope that there's not a blitz to contend with on the part of Buffalo very much, and release your back into the pattern most of the time, because you're right. You don't want to give up those offensive weapons. You want to get them out to control the Bills' coverage.
All right, so it's the Bills and the Raiders from the Coliseum in L.A. The game most of you will see is the second half of today's NBC doubleheader. And NFL Live halftime activities will continue.
This is the Domino's Pizza NFL Live Halftime Report. Brought to you by Domino's Pizza. Nobody knows like Domino's how you like pizza at home.
So the Raiders still battling for the division championship, leading the Bills, who have clinched their fourth straight in the AFC East, 20-14. But Buffalo has incentive, of course, because they want to clinch that home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Our O.J. Simpson is on the sidelines at the Coliseum. Let's get to him for his impressions of the first half. Juice?
Well, Bob, I must admit I was real impressed by the Raiders in the first quarter. They came out playing the type of ball I think that they're really suited for. They have big, strong offensive linemen, hard running backs, and they ran the ball and they threw very conservative passes. They accomplished two things by doing that. They kept the Bills' offense off the field, and they limited the responsibility of Schrader. They were using Schrader much like Kansas City uses DeBerg, short passes. They got away from that in the second quarter, and I think they sort of lost a little control of the football game. Now, they're not doing anything the Bills didn't expect. They knew they would try to pound the ball. I expect the Raiders to come out in the third quarter, go back to doing what they did in the first quarter, running on first and second down, throwing the 5-yard passes, and you'll see a lot of Nick Bell, I think, in the fourth quarter.
All right, let's see what Will thinks.
Well, I was talking to Al Davis on Friday, and he said the thing that concerned him about the Buffalo game was that he felt they had a good plan on defense, but they could get hurt on special teams, and they have been. Buffalo ran the kickoff back for a touchdown, ran a punt back to set up their other touchdown.
Bill?
As well as the Raiders have played, this is not a safe lead against the Buffalo Bills. You know, Kelly can get that offense going pretty quick. It'll be an exciting second half.
All right, now on to other games. Phoenix has a 14-0 lead at home in the third quarter over the Redskins on a pair of Johnny Johnson touchdown runs in the second quarter. The Jets at Detroit, the Lions trying to be perfect at 8-0 for the season at home and to take their record to 10-4 and keep pace with Chicago atop the NFC Central, leading at the half, 24-14, 2 touchdown runs for Barry Sanders, including a 51-yarder. He's got 91 yards rushing at the half. San Francisco leads 10-9 over the Seahawks at the Kingdome. They're early in the third quarter. Atlanta can move into a first-place tie atop the NFC West with the New Orleans Saints if they win, and Anaheim looks like they will, leading at the half 24-7. Earlier today, Houston clinches the AFC Central, first time in their history they've ever won it outright, 31-6 over the Steelers. Warren Moon passes 4,000 yards in passing for the second consecutive year. Part of it was this touchdown pass to Haywood Jeffries that covered 16 yards in the third quarter. Alan Pinkett had a 98-yard rushing day, including 2 touchdowns. One of them was this 11-yarder in the fourth quarter. Later, Al Smith had a 70-yard run with a fumble. They sacked Neil O'Donnell 7 times. They win it going away, 31-6. Philadelphia now 9-5 with their 6th consecutive win. Very much in good shape for a wild card. Giants all but eliminated now at 7-7. Eagles win 19-14. Do it without Jim McMahon in the second half. Bruised ribs after he was sacked on that play by Lorenzo Freeman. Phil Simms threw a couple of touchdown passes to Dave Meggett in the first half, including this dump-off 14-yarder, but the Giants did not score in the second half. Jeff Kemp came in, the much-traveled one, in place of McMahon, and scrambling, he manages to throw this touchdown pass to Calvin Williams that brought them to within 14-10. The comeback was on. They led 16-14 in the fourth quarter when Matt Barr hooked a 32-yarder that could have given the Giants the lead. Then Roger Ruzek added a field goal, and the Eagles win it 19-14. And Lawrence Taylor knows it looks bleak.
This was the playoffs for us. Every game was a playoff game for us, and I can't say enough that I did not contribute, and I hurt the team.
We dug a hole for ourselves, and I think that's allowed us to keep focusing on every game because we really can't lose any. At least that's the way we have to take it. That attitude is making us play so hard and prepare so well that I think we can take it into the playoffs, but the next step at this point is Dallas.
Okay, the Broncos clinch at least a wild card and continue their battle with the Raiders for the championship in the AFC West. They prevail 17-7 at Cleveland. Even though the Browns are 6-8, they're hanging by a thread, not officially eliminated, playing with the sore shoulder. Elway threw a couple of touchdown passes. Kansas City had to come from behind, and in overtime they win 20-17, alive for a wild card, alive still for the championship in the AFC West as they thwart the upset bid by the San Diego Chargers. Dallas has won 3 in a row. New Orleans has lost 4 straight. Dallas wins 23-14. Emmitt Smith, 112 yards rushing. Dallas in good wild card shape. New Orleans once a lock to win the NFC West. Looks like they'll be tied for the top spot in that division with the Falcons, and they have split their 2 games head-to-head this year with Atlanta. Chicago back on the winning track with a 27-13 win at home at Soldier Field over the Packers, and so if the Lions beat the Jets, that tie will remain atop the NFC Central between Detroit and Chicago. And New England had to come from behind, trailing 17-3. They eventually catch up on the last play of regulation and win in overtime on Hugh Millen's 45-yard touchdown pass to Michael Timpson, 23-17 over the Indianapolis Colts. They allow me now to take a breath as you watch these messages from your local stations.